Hello, and welcome to today's webinar on the Global PWS Registry with Dr. Teresa Strong and Dr. Jessica Bohanowicz from the Foundation for Prader-Willi Research. Before we begin, a few notes about participation. Your audio was muted when you joined the call. Questions can be submitted via the question box on your screen. We should have ample time for questions after the presentation. When the webinar ends, we invite you to take a brief 5-question survey to let us know how we did. A recording of this webinar will be available for anyone who missed today's presentation or would like to watch it again. It is now my pleasure to welcome our presenters.
Are you all set, Andrea? Should I go ahead, or are you going to introduce?
Yes, ma'am. Go ahead, Dr. Bohanowicz.
Hi, everybody. I hope you're all having a good evening. My name is Jessica Bohanowicz. For those of you who may not know me, I'm the picture in the upper left corner of the slide that's on right now. Want to thank everybody that's on this slide. We have a great group of people that meets every month by phone to get together and brainstorm, talk about ideas on how we can continue to advance education about the registry and promote participation. And so I just want to thank everybody that's shown here. The goal for this evening is to try to make sure that we're providing information to everybody, whatever category you may fall into. So hopefully there are some of you who maybe have never heard about the registry before, and this is your first information session on it, and we'll be able to answer some questions that you may have. Maybe you know about it but haven't really created an account ever, interested, wanted to learn more. Maybe you created an account, but that's really about all. Maybe you haven't really completed any surveys yet, or completed a couple surveys, but are interested in coming back and finishing up. Or maybe you're one of the group that was super gung-ho and super excited when the registry launched a couple of years ago, and completed everything a couple of years ago, but it's been a little while since you've come in and updated your information, and it's likely that a lot of things have changed since then, and it's incredibly important that we'd love to have you come back in and update that information. Or perhaps maybe you belong to a group of people who is active in the registry in there on a pretty regular basis, and you really want to know about what kinds of information and data is coming out of the registry. So hopefully, by the end of this presentation, we'll have provided some information with whichever group you fall into. So to start off, I just wanted to sort of reiterate by giving an overview of the registry. As you may know, it is web-based. It's a series of web-based surveys, and it's really designed to be a comprehensive database of the story of everybody with PWS in the world. That's the ultimate end goal. And if we could collectively have all of that information, everybody's personal story, everybody's personal experience, all in one central place, then that allows us to do all kinds of data analyses, ask some really interesting questions to better understand what is the full spectrum of PWS, what are people experiencing, what is most common, what is least common. It can also help support the completion of clinical trials. So I kind of like to say, imagine the registry as a dating service, where if there's a company that is conducting a clinical trial and is looking for people who fit a certain set of criteria, maybe age or a diagnosis or on or not on certain medications, or maybe having a certain, struggling with a particular aspect of PWS, they may be looking for a certain subset of people. They can give us that information, and we can forward the announcements about the clinical trial to the people who match those criteria the best. And then it's up to you and your family whether or not you would like to reach out and follow up with that particular company or trial or research study. We would never provide your contact information to those researchers or to those companies. Kind of think of the registry as a gatekeeper of that information. The registry is also helping us determine areas of need of research and treatment that can help us identify areas that maybe are not being researched enough in PWS. So one example of those is that we know that there's not a lot known about aging in PWS. We've wonderful group of loved ones of PWS who are into their adulthood, maybe advanced adulthood, even some seniors. And that's an area that we really are interested in learning more about in order to be able to help families know what to expect and how to best help their loved ones. It can similarly guide standards of care. What are people trying, of what they're trying, what's working well, what maybe isn't working. And all of this, comprehensively is the ultimate end goal of trying to improve the lives of all of our loved ones with PWS. This is an IRB approved research study, meaning that it's undergone ethics approval by an institutional review board, which is basically an organization that oversees the safety and protection of research study participants. And the advantages of that are that the data can be used by FDA, by drug companies, by researchers. We can, as a community, we can do analysis and publish the data in the scientific literature to make sure that it's getting out to clinicians and to caretakers of people with PWS, and so that's a huge benefit to the registry. And the co-investigators of the registry are listed below. They include Teresa Strong, who's on the line today, if you have any questions for her, as well as Jennifer Miller and Sean McCandless, who you may be familiar with. The setup of the registry, as I mentioned earlier, is that it is all web-based. And it can seem a little bit overwhelming when you first come in because it is very comprehensive. As we know, Prader-Willi syndrome impacts almost every aspect of the body. And so we've really tried to collect information on all of the relevant aspects clinically, as well as things like quality of life. And so there are about over 40 surveys in the registry as a whole. However, the really cool thing about the registry is that it doesn't all have to be done in one sitting. You can come in, you can do one survey at a time. You can, even if you make it halfway through a survey, you can save it as a draft and come back in at a later time. So it's designed to really be manageable in little bite-sized pieces in order to fit the busy schedules that we all have. And the beauty of it, and you'll see this as we move forward, is that once you finish surveys, you get to see the aggregated data of everybody else in the registry that has answered those questions. So, for example, here's a chart of something that you might see. If you finish the neurology survey, you would immediately be able to see the answers to those questions. For example, has the participant, meaning the person with PWS, ever been examined by a neurologist? And you can see here of the 649 people that have answered that question, 485 have said yes. And so it's a really cool way for you as entering data into the registry to be able to get immediate feedback on how your answers compared to everybody else that's answering those questions. The other way that we've tried to make the registry really user-friendly is that it uses branching logic. So what this means is that every survey, we've tried to create a scenario where at the beginning of the survey, it asks you a series of yes/no questions. And if you say no to everything and that particular topic just doesn't really apply to your personal story with PWS, then you're pretty much finished with that survey. But if you say yes to things, so for example, this is a screenshot from the endocrinology medication survey. If you say yes to that the person has taken growth hormone, what that automatically triggers then are a series of follow-up questions about that specific topic. So for example, with growth hormone, maybe it asks the brand, the dose, the frequency, how old you were when you started it, if you're still on it, etc. So as I mentioned, what this does is it really tries to make the surveys that are most relevant to you are the ones that you'll spend the most time on, whereas the ones that maybe you haven't really experienced that particular topic area, you would just get to say no to everything and move on. So here's some more examples showing you the visual feedback, the charts and pie graphs that immediately get reported back to you. These particular ones are from the sleep survey, which I know is something that's of interest to all of us who have loved ones with Prader-Willi syndrome. And you can see here these particular questions have to do with whether or not the participant has had an overnight sleep study, whether or not they have excessive daytime sleepiness or narcolepsy, and whether or not they've been diagnosed with cataplexy. And as I mentioned, if, any person who goes in and takes these surveys, you would be able to immediately see all of these graphs. So again, the strength of the registry is really dependent upon you and families, caretakers of loved ones with Prader-Willi syndrome. The registry gets stronger with every piece of data that comes into it. So we're trying to make sure that we're covering not just the traditional demographics, like making sure that we have a broad representation of age and socioeconomic status, people from all around the world, as well as various different ethnicities. But it's also really important that we make sure that we're getting information and stories from those who may be doing really well versus those who may be struggling a little bit more, as well as diversity in living conditions and access to current standards of age, current standards of care. That can make a huge impact on how a family is coping with their Prader-Willi syndrome diagnosis. So moving on, what I wanted to go on to next is continuing to share some really interesting stories, really some interesting data back of the types of things that we're learning from the registry. So first off, this one's a pretty simple one. This is a breakdown of genetic subtype for everybody that's within the registry. You can see here that just shy of 50%, 49.3% of everybody that's in the registry has been diagnosed as PWS by deletion. And then there's 35.6% by UPD. And then there's other subsets, including those that don't know what subtype they are, as well as some imprinting defects and Shaft-Yang and smaller subsets, point mutations, etc. This is 860 people that have answered the question. That's a really large representation. And what it shows is that the subtype distribution, what we're showing within the registry is that the percentage of people with UPD is higher in the registry than what's previously reported in the literature. And that seems to be a common trend that a lot of clinicians are seeing. Some of the other types of analyses that we've done, we've looked at the length of stay in the NICU after delivery. And, for example, you can see here is that there is a small group, about 14% of people who spent no time in the NICU. And then there's sort of even distribution. And then you also have this group of about 7% of people that spent 2 months or longer in the NICU after birth. One of the other really cool aspects of the registry is that we can subgroup the data by certain criteria. So, for example, we can break it down by parts of the country. Teresa was up in Canada last year presenting some information on the registry, and she was able to show them some information about how NICU stays compare in Canada versus the United States. And this was really interesting to us to look at, which is it kind of seems like the distribution of NICU stays is actually shifted shorter in Canada than it is in the United States. That the overall, it's still the same bell curve, but it seems to be shifted overall to shorter stays in Canada than in the United States. Now, we don't know the reasons for that at this point, but it is an interesting observation. This particular one is on growth hormone use. We get a lot of interest and questions about growth hormone with regards to Prader-Willi syndrome. This particular graph shows you some information about how old the person with PWS was when they started growth hormone, and the majority, 68% of the people within the registry that are on growth hormone started before they were 2 years old. We do have a lot of people that started over 2 years old as well, though. We can also look at distributions of hormone brand use. You can see there's a lot of various different brands that are used. The most common one is Genotropin, but there are a variety of different brands that are used. This one was a particular analysis that I found very interesting and I think shows another aspect of the power of the registry. We looked at sleep apnea, specifically sleep studies, and when we look at sleep studies within the registry, of the people that have had a sleep study, 70% were diagnosed with some form of sleep apnea, whether it be obstructive, central, or a combination of both. But what's really interesting is that we know that the most common treatment for sleep apnea is to be prescribed a CPAP machine. And so from one standpoint, it's great to know how many people who had a sleep study. It's great to know how many people were diagnosed with sleep apnea. But because the registry is information that's being reported by families, we can get at real world experiences and real world stories of what's really going on in people's homes and in group homes and in real life. So for example, with this particular question, we're able to see that of those that were prescribed CPAP, approximately half of them are using it less than it's prescribed or not using it at all. And so this becomes a really important way for us to start diving into not just what's being diagnosed clinically or what's being seen in the clinic, but what's actually going on in people's homes and people's lives. And what this shows is that although people are being prescribed CPAP, that there's a big struggle there in terms of it being used and being used effectively. So like I said, that's just some examples, some of the many examples of the types of data that we're pulling out of the registry. What I wanted to do next was kind of go over how we are trying to reach out and how we're trying to disseminate all of this information back to the community, because really the registry is powered by the community. This is your information, this is your data, and we really want to make sure that it is a community tool and is being shared back to the people that are building this incredible resource. So there's a lot of ways that we're doing this. One, of course, is webinars like this. So thank you again for coming on today. We hope that if you find it interesting that you'll share it. I hear there's going to be a recording. We can share it and disseminate this webinar. We also, the registry is releasing infographics and blogs out to the community. So perhaps if you've seen infographics like the ones that are pictured here, we're releasing these every 2 months or so. And we share these, the registry creates these infographics and then shares them to all of the PWS groups within the United States and around the world. If so, PWSA, groups in Australia, FPWR, etc. And then all of those groups are free to share these infographics with their membership. We're really excited that we were able to publish our first peer-reviewed paper in the scientific literature last year, which covered an introduction to the registry as well as some graph information about the basic demographics, how the registry was built. Putting information in the peer-reviewed scientific literature is incredibly important because this is where physicians, clinicians, researchers, this is where they go for information. So being able to share the information that's coming out from the registry and making sure that it's reaching the clinicians and physicians and researchers, putting it in the peer-reviewed literature is how we reach those people. Also, presentations at conferences. We presented data from the registry at convention, at PWR conferences, at PWSA conferences, at IPSO, and we'll continue to do that as well. And we're always looking for suggestions and requests on what types of infographics we should create next. What are the questions that are most interesting to you in the community? We've created one so far, as you can see here, on developmental milestones. We found that the one on choking and vomiting was received really well. There was a lot of interest on that one. Some other ones that we've created are on sleep, as well as anxiety. That was another one that people responded really well to. And the one that was released most recently, just last month, was the one on vision and PWS, which covered statistics on the incidence of strabismus, as well as the percentage of people that had, of those that had strabismus, how many of them sought corrective surgery for that, and at what age they sought that surgery. So if you're ever looking for these kinds of infographics, please reach out to your respective organizations, and they're happy to share them. They're often all over Facebook and in newsletters and e-blasts, etc. As I mentioned, we successfully published a paper in the peer-reviewed scientific literature. This paper is actually what's called an open access journal, meaning that it is immediately available to everybody, completely publicly, completely for free. So this link here on the bottom would take you to the paper. If you're interested at all in reading that paper, that link can take you to it. Basically what it covers is how the registry was built, what some of the governance and about the registry is, and then some really early data about the demographics that we've been able to report so far. As I mentioned, this is sort of a first paper, but what it does is it allows us to have a reference out there so that as we continue to put out more information and more papers, there is sort of that baseline of what the registry is. So moving on, we've talked about how we, as the registry, have been analyzing lots of data and sharing it back to the community, but we're also really excited to share other ways that the registry is being used. As you as the community have continued to contribute your information, there's been tremendous recognition from physicians and researchers and drug companies recognizing how powerful this tool is and wanting to utilize it for various different purposes. One is developing new endpoints for clinical trials, and I'm going to expand upon that one a little bit on the next slide. We have a lot of physicians and clinicians who've been coming in wanting to look at data to better understand what types of medications and treatments and supplements are being taken, trying to better understand the spectrum of behaviors, etc. And the project that you may have heard, the largest project we've run through the registry is Path for PWS, and I'll be speaking about all of these. One of the really great things with regards to the clinicians is that even if they may see a dozen patients or hundreds of patients, they know their patient cohort really, really well. But what they're really interested in, what they see the value of the registry is being able to maybe compare what they're seeing in their small subset of patients to what the registry as a whole may be reporting. So maybe their cohort is 100 or 200 patients in their particular clinic, whereas the registry may have 800 people that have answered those specific questions. So endpoint development through the registry, an example of this, if you're familiar at all with the CARE PWS clinical trial that's currently going on by Levo, this is a phase 3 clinical trial looking at the impact of carbetocin in Prader-Willi syndrome. And one of the endpoints for this clinical trial is a survey that's called the PAD-Q, which stands for the PWS Anxiety and Distress Questionnaire. And what is so just exciting is that the PAD-Q is actually developed and tested and validated through the registry. So Levo, in collaboration with the registry, sort of developed the initial questionnaire, and they put it out to the registry. It's possible that some of you may have even taken it through that process. And it allowed them to collect some early data, understand how well the questions were working, and to basically be able to do a dry run of how this endpoint, how this instrument worked, in order to make sure that it was working the best that it could, so that they could then use it for their clinical trial. And it is now actively being used for their phase 3 clinical trial. So for any of you that took this PAD-Q survey a year or so ago, thank you, because you were critically important in helping Levo understand how this survey was working and to make sure that it could be used as a tool to see whether or not their therapeutic is having a positive impact during the clinical trial. As I mentioned, there are a lot of researchers and clinicians that are actively utilizing registry data. This particular screenshot is from a poster that was presented by a med student that was working with Dr. Jennifer Miller on GI problems in overweight and obese, specifically in overweight and obese individuals with PWS. Soleno Therapeutics has done a lot of interesting analysis trying to get a better understanding of the type of psychiatric medications that are being used in PWS. And we have several collaborations currently ongoing as well, looking at GI issues in PWS, as well as growth hormone therapy, trying to get a better understanding of access for adults. The project that you may have heard the most about is Path for PWS. This is one of the largest projects, the largest project that we've run through the registry. Path for PWS is a non-interventional observational study trying to understand the serious medical events in Prader-Willi syndrome. And this study is being conducted over 4 years, and it includes reporting of information on 6-month intervals. So this is really actively getting people to come back into the registry at regular 6-month intervals to provide details and reports on any and all serious medical events, including blood clots that may have happened to their loved one with PWS over the past 6 months. It provides the opportunity to upload accompanying medical records, and it also includes some behavioral assessments as well. this study was fully enrolled last July, and what was so exciting, the positive response from the community was overwhelming. The goal was to enroll 500 people, and we actually enrolled 700. So far exceeded the expectations, and a lot of that is thanks to the tremendous work of the community partners shown here, all of whom collaborated together to really make sure that information about PATH is getting out to the community and to help drive education and participation in the study. Now, PATH is being done through the registry, so it is part of the registry. It's not a separate study. It is just a sub-project that is run through the registry. But what it does is that it's really trying to make sure that we are focused on better understanding the serious medical events, specifically in PWS. So within PATH, so all of the people in PATH are also in the registry. Specifically within PATH, this is the age subset, the breakdown by age. And the really great thing about PATH is that what it helped us to do is to increase the overall number of participants within the registry by over 50%. And more importantly, it helped us to really significantly increase the number of people within the registry that were in the 18 older group and in the 12 to 17 age group. When the registry first launched, it was really heavy on parents of very, very young children, and PATH has helped us tremendously to make sure that we're getting better representation of those families who have loved ones in their teens and loved ones who are adults. The PATH participants have been amazing. They're staying really, really engaged in terms of updating their surveys every 6 months. We're currently about 12 months in, 18 months, we're going into 18 months. And Lisa, matter of fact, who's also available by phone or email if you're in PATH, she's been managing the PATH study and is actively engaging all the families and is critically important to helping us achieve these completion rates. What have we learned about serious medical events so far? Well, within each 6-month interval, more than 10% of families are experiencing at least one serious medical event. These are serious medical events that may result in hospitalizations or an ER visit. A lot of the commonly reported serious medical events can include major GI issues, blood clots, hospitalizations for mental health issues or suicide attempts, things like seizures, pneumonia, broken bones, things along those lines. So we think it's critically important over the coming months and years. Like I said, we're about 1.5 years in, and PATH is a 4-year study. We're going to be able to have a much better understanding as a community as to what are the frequency, how frequently our loved ones with PWS are having these very serious medical events, and what are those serious medical events. We can also break them down by age, which we think is going to be an additionally very important piece of information. So, for example, people who are in their 40s and older, the serious medical events that they may be facing may be completely different than the serious medical events that perhaps a teenager is having. So I will basically, coming to the end, I have a couple more slides I want to show, but the gist as I come to a close is your story represented? So going back to that initial slide, if maybe this is your first time hearing about the registry, or maybe you started an account but haven't come back in for a while, hopefully the data that we've shown you, some of the graphs and pictures that we've shown you, will motivate you to come on in and to share your story, whether or not some of your question answers fall with the majority, or whether or not you're like, you know what, that's completely not my experience at all. It's incredibly important that like I mentioned, the more information we have, every single data point, every little bit of information that we have just makes the registry stronger and stronger. Coming soon to the registry, we're excited. The registry is incredibly dynamic. It can grow and change. We can add surveys. We can remove surveys over time, which is another tremendous asset to the platform. So we are actually actively creating a survey to help us understand what the impact of COVID-19 is on all of our lives. We're hearing from a lot of families that there are concerns, there are struggles. Our lives have all changed. We're at home more. Children are not at school. Schedules have been interrupted. And so we are very interested in being able to provide back to the community information about what we're all experiencing during this time. as well as ways that maybe people are coping, what's working for families, so that we can share that information back to try to help each other. We're also developing a survey to allow families to report on common clinical tests, common blood tests. That's another survey that we're currently actively developing. If you've never created an account before, this one slide is for those of you who may have never created an account that might be interested in coming in and creating one. Just to clarify, you'll see the word respondent and you will see the word participant. The participant is the person that has PWS. It's your loved one that has PWS is the participant for the registry. So when you are first creating the account, you are the respondent. You are the person who is entering the information on behalf of the participant. So when you create your account, you're going to create it under your name and with your email address because you are the contact person for the account. But once you create the account, you will then add a participant, and all of the information there is about your loved one with PWS. So for example, the date of birth is for your loved one with PWS, not for you. Let's spend more time. As you go to the registry website, there are a lot of resources that can help you. If you have any issues or any concerns at all, you can email me at info@pwsregistry.org, or you can reach Lisa at info@passwordpws.com. Also on the registry website, there are links. We've created basically little step-by-step instruction guides with screenshots, with pictures of exactly how to create an account, how to access surveys. If you already have an account, there's a guide on how to come back in and update your surveys. You don't have to take them all over again. You can basically just click on them and change anything, change any answers. It will populate with what you put in before. And if it's all the same, you just click submit, or you can change anything that's changed. All of those instructions are provided on that website. But as I mentioned, please don't hesitate to reach out to us if we can help in any way. And with that, I just want to say thank you. And I think, Andrea, that we have Christy Wickerbach on the call as well. She is a parent who is also an active respondent within the registry, and she was hoping to be able to share some information about her experience in the registry as a parent and as a user.
All right. Hi, this is Christy. Thanks for that. That was very informational. I just wanted to share a little bit what I have found from the registry is all the information. Sorry, let me get my thoughts together here. All the information that is gathered there, I've been able to use, like when I go to a doctor's office or to different specialists, and I can tell them, you know what, I have found maybe one or two other people with Prader-Willi that have had this happen to them. And so then I can say, okay, this is not Prader-Willi, this is just justice, versus where if there's a group of people, even if it's a small group of people, I can say, well, maybe this is more of a Prader-Willi sort of thing. The information has also kind of made me feel that I'm not alone in all of this. You know, I can look at all the information and go, okay, there's other people that are dealing with the same issues, the same situations that I am. And by doing that, it just makes, you know, your world seem a whole lot smaller and not quite so alone. I think that the registry at first, I was a little bit intimidated to start. I kind of looked at it and I was kind of nervous. Getting the consent done and the initial surveys are by far what took the longest. I'll say it took me maybe 2 hours total. I didn't do it all in one sitting. I sat down one night and started it and finished the next day. But after you get that done, the rest is really easy. You know, you get an email once in a while, they'll tell you need to update something. I'll go in if something has changed, if her medications have changed. I kind of have a little thing in my phone that reminds me to go in and change things on occasion too. So, but other than that, I think that all this information that they're gathering is going to eventually help with research. It's going to help the professionals with better plans of care for our kids. I think that the time that we spend investing in this amazing project is going to benefit everybody in the long run. Does anybody have any questions about that at all?
That covers all the things that we wanted to ask you about, the time it took you to start, to complete your surveys. I think the most important thing that you mentioned is the part about being able to try to understand when something's going on. Is that PWS or is that justice? And I think we hear that from a lot of caretakers. Is trying to differentiate what is PWS and what is just the natural personality of our loved ones.
Yes, and I think that happens a lot more than we realize. You know, a lot of times you see something happening, you're automatically like, oh, that's PWS. Well, I go in here and I'll look and I'll be like, no, that doesn't seem to be happening to other people, or, you know, or, oh yeah, that's very prevalent in our population. And so that I know kind of who to talk to or where to go to find the help that I need. So I have found like a lot of these infographics extremely helpful when before I go to an appointment to kind of look things up and see, and I can tell the doctor, this is happening a lot to a lot of our kids. So I think we need to look deeper into why this is happening. So
Andrea, did we have any questions from the viewers that attended the webinar?
We do have a few questions, and if anybody else has questions, feel free to submit them via the question box on your screen. Our first question is, how do you get the graphs or the results from the survey that they're taking? I think you mentioned that it pops up automatically. Can you explain a little bit more about what that looks like?
Sure. So the very first time that you take a survey, once you click, there's a button on the bottom right that is a submit. Once you click submit, it will automatically show you the results from that survey. That's the first time that you've taken it. Once you've already taken the survey, you can always go back and look at the information at any other time. And the way that you would access that is that you, if I can try to show some, I can try to get some screenshots together to share, but basically you go into your account, you go into your completed surveys, and there's a list of the surveys that you've completed. And to the right of that, there'll be little tabs that say view or edit or update, things along those lines. But there is a tab there, not a tab, a little button that says visualize data or visualize responses. Visualize aggregate data, I think is what it may say. And if you click on that, it will bring back up all of the graphs for that particular survey. So again, the first time you take it, as soon as you click submit, it will automatically show them to you. But after you've taken it the first time, you can always go log back into your account, and you can always click that visualize aggregate data button, and it will show it to you again. And if you have any problems finding that button, please don't hesitate to email me, and I can walk you through that.
Great. Another question. On the slide about growth hormone, you mentioned that about 2/3 of children with PWS started growth hormone before age 2. Have you noticed that younger generations are starting growth hormone at an earlier age compared to some of the older generations who might not have access to the advances in growth hormone and as well as other treatments when they were younger?
Sure. So we haven't actually done that analysis yet. I think you're referring to this one here, but we can, and that is one of the analyses that we have on our list to do. So this particular one is of everybody who has said yes, that they were ever on growth hormone. How old were they when they started? But what it does not take into account is that, you know, people who are like, I know my nephew is 15 now, and he was born right about when growth hormone was coming of age for PWS, and so he's been on it since he was born. But there are people who maybe who are in their 30s or 40s who growth hormone was not easily accessible to them. So that is a very relevant, very important question, and it is something that we do want to look at. And not just for growth hormone, but I think for a lot of the data within the registry, there's a lot of interest in understanding how things may be different for people who are whose loved one is currently maybe 15 years and younger versus those whose loved one is an adult. Whether that be the types of therapy that they may have received when they were younger, etc. So but the important thing is that we do have the ability to dissect the data by those criteria.
That's great, thank you. And then another question, it sounded like there's a lot of involvement by families with younger children in the registry and in PATH specifically. If a parent or caregiver of an adult with PWS or the individual with PWS themselves want to get involved with the 4-year PATH study, how can they get involved?
So PATH specifically is the PATH study is fully enrolled. So as a study in terms of being able to have Lisa follow up with you and make sure you're doing your surveys every 6 months. And from the terms of the PATH has monetary incentive in that there were Amazon gift cards for participation. From that standpoint, PATH is closed. However, almost all of the surveys that are involved in PATH are, as I mentioned, just already in the registry. So the surveys that are in PATH are accessible to anyone who's in the registry. So for example, these surveys on hyperphagia and food behavior, food safe zone, the PWS profile, a lot of these surveys were developed in conjunction with Elizabeth Dykes and Elizabeth Roof at Vanderbilt, who many of you may be familiar with. All of those surveys are available to anybody that is within the registry. There are some people within the registry who are self-reporting, meaning an adult with PWS has created the account themselves. That's a very small subset. What we have tried to encourage is that the account still be created by the parent, but that the parent or the caretaker, in some cases it's a sibling, in some cases we have people with PWS who are in their 50s or 60s and their parents may have passed away and their caretaker is now a sibling, or perhaps they live in a group home. What we've done is encourage our caretaker to create the account, but to answer the surveys with the help of the person with PWS. And we have families that are doing that for people who are teenagers as well. I think it's, we understand it's really important that the person who this data is about be able to have a voice as the surveys are being filled out. But so we kind of found that the best course of action is to have a caretaker, parent, guardian, etc., manage the account with the help in concert, in cooperation with the adult with Prader-Willi syndrome. Does that answer that question?
I think it does. While we're waiting for any other questions to come in, it looks like we've gotten them all so far. Could you go to the very first slide again and remind everybody how they can get onto the web registry and where they can find that URL to log in tonight and fill out their registry information?
Sure. So this is the homepage for the registry here, www.pwsregistry.org. And when you come to this page, if you've never created an account before, in that top right corner, you'll click register. It's the same as clicking this green button down here on the bottom right, either one of those. The register button is if you've never created an account. If you have an account and you want to come back in, you would press the log in button. If you haven't been in there in a while, it's very likely that it's going to ask you to reset the password. The system has some very strong security measures that requires that the password be reset every 6 months. So it's likely that it will ask you to reset that. And if you have any problems with that process, again, please don't hesitate to reach out. If you think that you created an account but you're not sure, what we would ask is that you please contact us. We can look it up and find it out for you. It's better that we find it or be able to give you a definite answer as to whether you have an account or not, versus you creating a duplicate one, because then we have to go back through and basically safeguard and double check and make sure that there aren't multiple accounts for the same family. As you can imagine, what that means is that we have duplicate data points, which can impact the data that we're collecting. So if you think that you have an account but you don't remember, please reach out to us and we will confirm that for you.
Hey, Jessica, this is Teresa. Thank you for a great job explaining all of that. I wanted to bring up one other thing that, that I found recently. So I have a son who's 26 with PWS, and of course I was one of the first ones that was in the registry. So, we have records in there over the last 5 years, and I have found it really useful as a place to keep a lot of information. As much as I think I'm going to remember when this happened or when that happened, or what drugs he was on when, I don't. And so, it is a nice sort of living medical record that I can go back and check. And, you can print out the information and take it to your doctor, or you can just refresh your memory if you forget something. So I think I've come to appreciate that more now that he's been in there for 5 years, because I can see, 6 or 7 years down the road that it's going to be really helpful to be able to know when things happened and recall, as I said, what diet, what supplements, what medications he's been on.
I did also just want to add, one of the questions that we do get sometimes, Andrea, is who has access to the data and, privacy concerns. And I just want to reiterate that the only people that have access to the actual identified information within the registry are the principal investigators, myself, and Lisa Matisak, who's running the PASS study. So it's a very, very small subset of people, like I mentioned, that went through the IRB approval, that have access to the identified information. When we're reporting all of these graphs, all these charts, all this data that we're showing you, all of that is generated from data that's pulled out from the registry, and it's pulled out in a way that's de-identified, meaning when the data is pulled out, anything that's considered personal health information is removed from that data set. So dates of birth, addresses, personal information, basically anything that could identify you, names, etc. All of that is removed. So all of the analysis is done on de-identified data.
And Jessica, that goes to the point that the platform that the registry is on is run by the National Organization for Rare Disorders. You see the little NORD in the corner on the bottom right. And they run rare disease registries for a number of organizations. This platform was built with the assistance of the National Institutes of Health and the FDA as far as helping guide how the platform is set up and how the data is managed. And it's, so there's some additional oversight to the whole process.
We have one more question. Let me pull it up for us. One of our participants would like to see if their daughter's on the registry. We will get with you after the webinar and follow up to make sure that you are in the registry. And that was from Angelique. So don't worry, Angelique will follow up with you. It doesn't look like we have any other questions today. So with that, I'd like to thank both of our presenters, Dr. Jessica Bohanowicz and Dr. Teresa Strong, for joining us today and telling us more about the Global PWS Registry. Thank you.
Have a good night, everybody.
Thanks so much.